This is the Johnny and Friends Ministry Podcast, and I'm your host, Crystal Keating. Thank you for joining me each week for real conversations about disability and finding hope beyond suffering. This month, as we honor Down Syndrome Awareness Month, we are sharing a new resource for special needs parents called My Baby Has a Disability, Life-Giving Questions and Answers. Please visit johnnyandfriends.org/podcast to download your free copy. For our conversation today, I'm excited to talk with Nicole Ballerini, a wonderful mama to 3 kids. When Nicole and her husband first decided to grow their family, it wasn't on their radar that their daughter Sage might be born with Down syndrome. Listen as Nicole walks through the thoughts and emotions that she experienced following her daughter's diagnosis and how her outlook has changed over the past 3 years. Don't miss this open conversation about the real fears, challenges, and blessings of being a special needs mama. It's a joy to be speaking with Nicole Ballerini today as we honor Down Syndrome Awareness Month and have an open conversation about the real fears, challenges, and blessings of being a special needs mama. Welcome to the podcast, Nicole.
Thank you for having me.
It's so great to have you here. It's so great to have you in person, talking to you. You have such a great spirit. I'm so excited for this conversation. I always like to start our conversations with a little bit of history. I think it's probably the counselor in me. I love to know a little bit of background. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with us, maybe talking a little bit about your family background and especially how you came to Christ.
Yeah, totally. So I was raised in a Christian home. Both my parents were in leadership at church. I have 2 sisters. We had just like a small little family. We lived in Santa Monica. And as life went on, I was, I think, 10 or 12 years old. My parents got divorced and that kind of uprooted everything for us and a lot of change happened. And so I think that kind of like pushed me into a lot of years of kind of floating and trying to figure out what I actually believe. And so I was raised in the church. I knew about the Bible. I don't think I really understood what being a Christian meant. I didn't really understand a relationship with Jesus. And so I had a kind of rough, until my early 20s. And then during that time, I had my first child. He's 10 now. I was a single mom for about 7 years, which in hindsight was a very beautiful time. But during it, it's rough. Yeah. But I had friends that I'd kept that were believers through my adolescent years into when I became an adult and a single mom and all that. And so I'd had a friend in particular, her name's Casey, and she was a worship leader at a church, and she said, you should just come to church and just try it. And at the time, I sort of was in the sort of limbo phase of I know that, God is real, but I also have a son and I want to raise him right. And I don't know what that looks like, but I'm interested in finding out more. And so I went to church, and it was a whole different experience than what I grew up with. And yeah, during that time, she basically led me back to the Lord. I had another friend, Tabitha, who I've been friends with forever. And just the 2 of them were like my mentors, I would say. Even Casey's mom was my mentor. And I just had a lot of women rally around me. So I came to the Lord again, I would say about 6 years ago. At that same church, a couple years later, I met my husband. Yeah, we got married real quick, about 6 months later. And
after meeting him?
Yeah, we started dating right away. We got engaged 4 months later, married couple months after that. And then when my son I was pregnant with my daughter, with Sage, and we wanted to be a real, unit. I mean, he had a different last name than my husband. And so Matt adopted him when he was 8 years old. Wow. And so now we're all Ballerini. And it's just
beautiful.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I really believe that if you've had a true relationship with the Lord, even as a child, even if you stray, I know that He's faithful.
Amen.
And so when I hear about people going through faith crisis and straying, I just have this peace about the Lord is still working in them. It's just a timing thing. And you got to let people figure it out because, if we don't ever question anything, then how do we come up with our own understanding of what the Lord means to us, No,
I think that's so right on. And, as you talk about your husband and you talk about now he is part of this beautiful family, your husband, your son. As a couple, I'm sure you guys are thinking about the future.
Yeah.
And what it could hold.
Yeah.
I imagine every couple comes together with hopes and dreams of the future. Mm-hmm. I mean, what was that like for you two? What did you imagine it would be?
So we both really love the outdoors and doing adventure things and hiking and, all that, camping, backpacking, all of it. And so for us, I mean, even in our vows, we had made our own vows. And like one of the vows I remember distinctly writing was that I promised to always keep our love for the outdoors like a core thing for us. And so that was huge for us. And we did want more kids and we wanted to travel. We both love to travel. We met and got married fast. And so we had a lot of dreams and they were like really big dreams. And we kind of just went all in. Yeah.
It's an exciting time when you're
so
thinking
fun.
about what's our family going to look like in the future.
Yeah, totally.
So here you are together and you find yourself then pregnant, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what was that like? What was your pregnancy like? You're a young woman in this new family. Mm-hmm. I mean, did you ever think that your baby may have any complications?
No. And actually, so we decided we wanted kids right away. And I mean, I was 33 at the time and he was 31 and he didn't have any kids. And as much as we wanted like this carefree, traveling, whatever life, we also wanted to start having kids. We started praying that we'd get pregnant like right away. And it took a couple months to get pregnant and we just kept praying and then it happened. And I went in for the first trimester screening and my doctor was like, you should do the Down syndrome test. And I thought, I don't need to. I'm healthy. I have a healthy baby. I take care of myself. I eat well. I don't need to take it. Plus, our insurance probably won't cover it because we had weird insurance at the time. And so he said, well, you'll find out if it's a boy or girl through this test also. So you might as well just take it because they can find out through the chromosomes if it's a boy or girl. And of course, I'm anxious to find out if it's a boy or girl. So I was like, okay, fine, we'll do it. So we did the test and it took a couple weeks, I think, to get the results, if I remember correctly. But it wasn't like I was waiting anxiously. I was waiting to find out, the gender. And it was on a Friday at like 3:30 or something. And I got a phone call from my doctor. It was his cell phone. And so that always makes me nervous. Sure. And he's like, I'm calling you from my cell phone. Please call me back. I'm out of the office, but call me back on this phone. And so we were supposed to leave that night. I called him back and he was like, your test came back that your baby has a 75% chance of having Down syndrome. So you need to make an appointment with the perinatologist. And I said, okay. Like it kind of just like, it was like a shot to the gut. I was like, what? That can't be right. And so I immediately was in hysterics. I called my husband at work and I was like, the baby has Down syndrome. And he's like, well, calm down. We need to go see the specialist. Like, don't freak out now. You need to calm down. He's a very calm person. He's a great person in crisis because he's just very mellow. And he's like, well, let's just make an appointment. And so I called my mom crying. I was like, the baby has Down syndrome. And she was like, oh my gosh, well, we're all just trying to figure it out. Like, what does it mean?
Right.
I called him back and he said, you need to get in on Monday. And I said, I can't, we're going to Tahoe. And he's like, well, you can't go to Tahoe. You need to figure this out. It's like, I was almost 16 weeks at the time.
This is your doctor saying
my doctor.
This.
And he's like,
That's got to create more fear too.
Oh, 100%. And so I decide I'm not going to go to the doctor yet. I'm going to go on this trip. I don't want to freak out my 10-year-old and be like, something's happening with the baby. We're not going to Tahoe. We're just going to go as planned. So the whole drive up, it's like a long drive. I want to say 6+ hour drive. Right. I'm like on Instagram trying to find pictures of kids with Down syndrome and like Googling Down syndrome. And you get all these crazy stories, but you also get all these great stories. Sure. And it was just like information overload. I was in tears the whole time. So we come back, I make the appointment. I went in to the doctor and he said, oh yeah, there's a heart defect. That's usually a sign of a child having Down syndrome, a chromosome issue. He said, you should do the amnio. And I didn't feel comfortable doing it just because there was a risk of miscarriage, Mm-hmm. And so he was so great. He said, okay, well, here's the thing. Are you planning on terminating? And I said, no, we're not going to terminate. Whoa. And he said, okay, if you're not planning on terminating, let's just do the ultrasound. You don't need an amnio, and we're just going to carry on. You're going to come here every couple weeks. We're going to monitor the baby, and we're just going to see how things go. And so I felt like from him, he was very supportive of just our feelings, really. Like, he didn't treat it differently. He was very good at giving us information about what was going on, but he wasn't trying to sway us either way. But our regular obstetrician up until 29 weeks was like, I don't know, this isn't just going to change your life. It's going to change everybody else. Are you sure you want to go through with this? You might have a baby that's like a 9-year-old for the rest of your life. It could be a vegetable, which honestly, I hate that term with kids anyway, because that's like, you just can't label a person a vegetable. So he was,
No, because there's a spirit and soul
yes,
in there.
it's a person. Yes. And, to be honest, if Sage had turned out that way, we would have dealt with it and we would have loved her the same. And it didn't take away from the love that we have for our child anyway, right? And so, but we had to sit him down. I remember going to it was probably the 29 or 30 week appointment. And I was like, listen, we're not changing our minds. Yep. We have the name already planned out. We are excited to have our baby. We just want to be excited about our baby coming and not worry anymore. I mean, there was so much unknown. I was depressed. Absolutely. I had a really hard pregnancy, just emotionally. So, and after that, he never said anything again.
You talked about calling your mom right away after you had received the first glimpse that there might be something concerning. After you received the news of Sage's diagnosis of Down syndrome, did you share that news with anybody else? And if so, what were their responses?
We did. So we thought it would be good to tell people. Just, we had the information, and I don't think it ever crossed our minds to not tell people. We got mixed responses. Some people, when we first told them about the test, before we got the final ultrasound, they would say things like, oh, those tests are wrong all the time. And they would tell us stories about people who had false positives. Like, oh, I had a friend who they said the baby was going to have Down syndrome 100% and the baby's totally normal. And, you'd think oh gosh, my baby's not going to be normal. These are the words that, in now that you're in the community of disability, we don't say that.
You don't
my
say
baby
normal.
Is normal. My baby is normal. But at the time, I mean, it was such a new thing for us that these are the things that we thought. And
you're taking it all in.
Oh, totally. And, our idea of normal is different from what it is now. But back then, that's what we thought, But then we also had people who said, well, this baby's going to have the same amount of love. This baby's going to be so loved. And actually, I have an aunt and uncle who work in Olympics. They do the big screens on Olympic stuff. And they sent me a text and said, I hear we have a special Olympian coming. And they were excited about it. And that was okay, it's going to be okay. If my family thinks it's going to be okay and they're going to help us, then it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it like for your husband?
I mean, it was a rough time for us. There was so much unknown. And, we had all these plans for our life and we couldn't have them anymore. And it was sort of, as newlyweds, being thrown into this right away. I mean, I was pregnant 4 months after we got married and we hadn't even known each other for a whole year yet. And we're thrown into this crazy thing. And for him, I mean, he is such a steady guy, which was so great because that's what I needed. But I think both of us were frustrated, I think, with just not knowing what's going to happen. We were overloaded with information from the internet and the doctors. And I think it did take a toll on him emotionally too. It was, I think we were just kind of in a funk. I don't know how to explain it other than that. It was just really hard to find joy in that season. It was different than when you're pregnant with a baby who's typical and doesn't have health problems and you rejoice over oh my gosh, we're going to have a baby shower and they're going to wear this and they're going to wear that. We couldn't plan for that with Sage because we weren't sure what was going to happen. And so even on our invites to our baby shower, just said, we found out our baby has Down syndrome and we're really excited to meet her, but we don't know what we're going to need. So gift cards to Amazon are awesome because you hear, oh, they're smaller than like a typical person. They're pint-sized people. And so we didn't want to get a bunch of clothes that she couldn't wear. So, yeah.
I'm happy to hear that you guys had a shower.
Oh my gosh, we had 200 people come up.
Of course you did. Yeah. They love you guys.
Yeah, we rented out a park. We invited church and friends and family. We both have big families. We got a hot dog cart with soda. It was just a picnic kind of thing. And so many more people than we thought were going to come came. We took over. Yeah, it was awesome.
So good. You have a son, you have Dylan, and I'm sure that he's sensing just the pressure that you and your husband are feeling. What was that like for him before Sage was born?
I was nervous to tell him because it's a big thing. And really, we didn't understand what was happening.
That's
and we
true.
were nervous.
And you didn't know.
We didn't know.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to give him too much information. I didn't want to give him not enough information. And so in hindsight, if I could do it again, I probably would have approached it differently. We did tell him that she was going to have Down syndrome, and we didn't know what that was going to look like. And he goes to a school they do inclusion, have an inclusion program there. And so there are kids with Down syndrome that he was exposed to already. And so he said, oh, there's a little boy in his class. Oh, she's going to have Down syndrome like this little boy. And we're like, yeah, she's going to have Down syndrome too. And at the time, Born This Way, it's a TV show about young adults with Down syndrome. That season came out when we were pregnant with Sage. And so we would all sit down as a family and watch it together. And he would go through times of like, I'm sad because I think Sage is going to talk like them and nobody's going to understand her. And he had fears like that of like, what if she can't talk? And, those were his fears as a 7-year-old thinking like this, I don't know. So I
kind of feel like it's like this protective big brother thing even.
Oh,
like
big
people
time.
Won't be able to understand
Yes.
her. It wasn't even about him. It was her relationships with others.
Yes. Totally. He is so protective over her. It's very, very sweet. But I think it was even back then where he was worried about her. And then when we did bring her home, she was very medically fragile. And so we would have him like wash his hands, take a bath when he got home from school because she couldn't have germs. And I was nervous to have him hold her because she was so little and had oxygen and like all this stuff. And so in hindsight, I would have let him hold her more. I wouldn't have made it such a scary thing. Like, oh, she's just hold her. And he's great with his sister now. We just had another baby and he's just goes right in and picks her up. And I wish that I had given that to him back then.
No, that's so good to think about, just moving forward with your son and how protective he is. Just what a beautiful thing that he can love in his sister like that. I want to go back to as you were pregnant, even your spiritual life. I mean, you and your husband, you're believers, you're walking with the Lord, but trials have a way of, uprooting us in some ways. What was it like to walk with God through your pregnancy, especially as you were facing kind of a big question mark for your future and your family's future?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing I struggled with was being, I wouldn't say angry at God, but really questioning, why us? We are so active and so busy and we have so many goals and so many plans. Why us? Like, this is going to keep us from doing the things we love to do.
Totally.
And in my head, I thought we're going to need to have a nurse with us. We're not going to be able to go anywhere. We can't take her outside. Like I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And, doctors give you the worst case scenario because they have liability issues to deal with, right?
Right.
And so on the parent side of it, I feel like we kind of get thrown a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't matter, like as far as information goes. And so trying to process all that information, I really questioned God's motive. And something I always came back to was we prayed for this baby and this is what God gave us. And so there's a reason for it. And even when, I did have a couple people say, well, are you going to keep the baby? Like when we would tell them, just clients and stuff who were not believers. And, of course we're going to keep the baby. We prayed for this baby. This is like what God is giving us. Of course, we're going to just have to figure it out. But I can't say that I didn't question God because I did a lot. And there was a lot of times I was very frustrated. I do think it helped us to grow closer to the Lord, especially as like a couple, because we really had to lean on him. When things are so unknown, that was like our footing basically of like, okay, we don't know what's going on, but God knows. And he's in control, even when we're not, And honestly, we were not in control of anything. It's a really weird feeling to not be in control of anything that happens with your child because we have this like false idea that we are in control of what they eat, what they do, where they go, what pajamas they wear, what bedding they have. Like we think we're in control of everything, but ultimately we're not. And I think that was a big lesson for us. And I mean, I do remember hiking pregnant. I like to hike this trail by our house and I remember a couple times just like breaking down and crying on the trail. And I just like sat on a rock and I just like let it all out. It was by myself and just like, this really stinks. Like, what is this going to do and I was worried about Dylan. I was worried about my 10-year-old. Like, how is this going to change him? I don't want him to ever feel like he can't go live his life because he has to help us or, anything like that. I think I was so worried about all of that I really questioned God a lot during that time. But with that being said, I looked into a devotional on the Bible app, the YouVersion app, and I thought there has to be a devotional for people that have kids with special needs or something. There has to be a special needs devotional. So I looked it up, and the first excerpt or whatever was from John 9. So it's about when Jesus heals a blind man, a man born blind. And so John 9:1, it says, as he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so the works of God might be displayed in him.
Amen.
And so I read that maybe 2 months before my daughter was born, and there had been a lot of questions like, what did I do wrong? Like, what am I eating? Like, maybe I ate something wrong. Maybe it's some gene that we have. Like, why is this happening to us? There was just so much of and honestly, once you learn the facts, it really is like a miracle when you get a baby with Down syndrome because it is something that just happens. There is a genetic side to it, but it's very rare. And so when I read that, I thought, it's nothing that matter I did. It's nothing that anybody did. And it was very empowering to read that because, God's going to do awesome things through her life. And that was a big thing for us. It says, this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. And I just remember thinking, she's our little miracle. He's going to do cool things and we're going to have a front row seat to it. And that was something that was very empowering at the time.
Oh my gosh, it's empowering just hearing that on this side of your experience to know that you had that kind of hope.
Yeah. I think that was the most impactful verse I've ever read in my life, even still today. It just hit me so hard reading that. There's a purpose for it. Amen. Nothing's by accident. God doesn't do things. He knows exactly what he's doing. He doesn't make accidents. He doesn't make mistakes, So that was awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we've been talking a lot about your pregnancy, and you did talk about, Sage entering your family, but I'm curious to know, what were your first feelings when you laid eyes on her after you gave birth to her?
Well, there was always a question in the back of our minds because we didn't do the amnio that okay, maybe she doesn't have it. We were a little bit in the back of our minds, maybe she didn't have it. And we had a lot of people at the time who were telling us, we're praying that she is healed of Down syndrome and that she's healed of her heart defect and all this stuff. And we thought, okay, well, maybe God's going to answer that prayer. I don't know. And in hindsight, it's oh my gosh, that's so crazy to even pray something like that.
Yeah. Would you recommend that people pray like that?
No, absolutely not. No. And in fact, I feel weird even saying that on the podcast, but honestly, I think it's a natural thing
that we need to hear.
Yes, because I think a lot of people think they're helping.
Yes.
And they say God's going to heal her. But I wouldn't wish in a million years that God had ever healed her of it because she is so special and she's such a blessing and has brought so much joy that God knows what he's doing. Sure, he can heal. He has the power to heal anything, anytime, whenever he wants to, but there's a reason for all of us being here, right? We all have a purpose. He has a plan for all of us. And I don't think that that's a wise prayer to pray against a plan that God has for someone, No. And I don't think that it was a mean-spirited or, it comes from a really place of, they really are caring about us and really want to pray for us and really want to help us. So, yeah. So in hindsight, I don't know. So when we had her, we were in the delivery room. I had a C-section. We had a whole team of people there. There was the NICU people and respiratory people and doctors and anesthesiologists and all these people in the room. And she came out and my husband looked at me and was like, well, our baby has Down syndrome. She totally looked like she had Down syndrome. She had all the features and she was this teeny tiny, cute little thing with so much hair. She was born with a full head of hair and she was just so tiny and so cute. And I don't know, it was just a pretty amazing time. Although very scary because then they whisk her off to the NICU. So, but it was great to see her. And it was a little bit of closure at that time of okay, she does have Down syndrome. Okay, so now we move on from here. So a lot of the unknown was solved in that moment. Yeah, she was born and she was there and she was exactly how God wanted her to be.
Oh my gosh. Okay, for all you listeners out there who want to know what Sage looks like, I've seen her and she is cute. You got to go to our podcast page, johnnyandfriends.org/podcast, to see a picture of Sage. You will fall in love. So
she's pretty cute.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we talked about some of the fears that you had when it was unknown. What were some of the fears that were realized, and what were some of the fears that just dwindled away?
So she had open heart surgery at 7 weeks old. And
oh my gosh.
Yes. And it did not go perfectly. And so we were in the hospital. Compared to other people, not very long, but for us, it felt like forever. She was there for about 6 weeks, and then she had to go back because she wasn't eating, and there was like some feeding issues. So she was officially out 4 months old. She went home on oxygen, and we couldn't hold her a certain way, and she couldn't get sick, and it was the middle of winter. It was February, so we had all kinds of germs and viruses going around. Yeah. So we did kind of quarantine her, but as soon as she got out of the hospital, we went to the Sequoias with her giant oxygen machine.
Yes, I love that.
We got a cabin. We drove all the way up there. Yeah, we just couldn't wait to go do something with her. So I would say, the fears of the medical stuff were, if I can be completely honest, worse than I had expected. However, that was a time that God really showed his character to us. And as terrible as it is, and you never want to see your child in pain, I never want to walk through that again. But in hindsight, I'm so thankful that I had the opportunity to see God in that way. And through the people that we met and through the other parents that we met on the floor. As far as like adventuring stuff, we really don't even have the time to do it anymore. It was such a worry for us. Yeah. And now with 3 kids, I mean, my husband and I just finally got away for the first time. My mother-in-law watched the kids this weekend, and all we talked about were the kids. It was like, we couldn't even just like relax and hang out and talk about other things. So, it's such a part of us now that, we were afraid of not ever being able to do anything again. But Sage loves the hiking backpack. She hikes with us. We go to Oregon every year camping. We camp a lot still. She loves sleeping in a tent. She loves camping. As worried as I was to not do any adventures, when she was 8 months old, I climbed Mount Whitney. So I feel like even though I had this big fear of like, we're never going to be able to do anything again, the Lord was like, oh no, here's like the best adventure you're probably going to be on with your girlfriends, So yeah, it's really cool how he does that for us still. I mean, the thing is, God knows our desires, right? And he knows our strengths and he knows what we want, and he might change the plan, but he never takes those things away from us completely, And so we are waiting for the day that we can go backpacking together and not worry about it. Yeah. But, we have 3 kids. I mean, let's be real. We can barely go to the grocery store. So I don't know why we think we're going to go on these huge adventures now. So, Down syndrome or not, we're parents now. So.
Oh my gosh. Well, Nicole, it's been so fun talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show to celebrate Down Syndrome Awareness Month. And I just had such a great time with you. I would love to talk to you again. Do you think that you could come back maybe next week? I think it'd be great to talk about community and the impact that's had in your life. I know that being a special needs mama means you got to be connected.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I would love that.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Well, bless you. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
I love how God has used Sage to transform Nicole and her family over the past 3 years. Sage has helped Nicole discover a whole new community of people that was never on her radar, a world of families that are facing many of the same challenges, but also the blessings of raising a child with special needs. Sage has helped Nicole recognize the valued place that each person has in the body of Christ. Be sure to listen next week to hear Nicole talk more about her journey, and you can see a cute photo of Sage at johnnyandfriends.org/podcast. If you know a mama whose world has recently been rocked by the diagnosis of disability for her baby, please share this podcast with her and her family. You can also download a copy of our new booklet, My Baby Has a Disability, Life-Giving Questions and Answers, at johnnyandfriends.org/podcast. I'm Crystal Keating. Join me again next week as we continue our conversation about being a special needs mother with Nicole Palestrini on the Johnny and Friends Ministry podcast.